Welcome everybody. Today we are going to speak about how to structure an article and how to identify the right uh, uh, questions. Right there, you have to identify research questions and how do you identify those research questions and how it helps. Right. So let's take an example. Like, can I take a live example from any of you that you are writing any topic that you're writing on? Can you say, like, should death penalty be abolished? Okay, let's take should death penalty be abolished, right? So there are different types of articles. There are some articles which are like this, where you're talking about a moral thing, like should death penalty be abolished, right? So it can be a moral question. Of course, there are legal doctrines that you can use to answer this. So let's just take this, right? So should death penalty be abolished? Now I'll show you. I'm going to work on my screen. I'm going to share my screen and I'll show you. I'll be working on a document and I'll show you how I will work on something like this, right? So the question is, should death penalty be abolished? Okay. And this is the title. Now, how are we actually going to structure this article? Now this the reason I'm taking this topic is also because it's an easy topic. Most of you know the subject. There is no problem with understanding what this is all about. So let's start with this. So should death penalty be abolished? Now, how will you structure this? Like, first of all, you have to find the research questions related to this. So what do you think are some of the research questions related to should death penalty be abolished? Can some of you suggest in the chat what do you think are potential questions that you want to answer in this article? Now, what offenses are subject to death penalty? Great, this is a great question, right? So Sakshi Jaiswal has suggested one question, and Uzair Ahmed has also suggested the same question. It's the most basic question. What offenses are subject to death penalty? This is, I think, is a basic question we can start from. What offenses are subject to death penalty in India? Okay, let's restrict it to India for the time being. So, should death penalty be abolished? We are guessing it is actually abolished in most countries in the world. So, when this question arises, we can assume that we are talking about India, right? So, we can add it to the topic abolished in India. Okay. Okay. So now I've got a lot of questions. That is great. Thank you for participation. Okay, we have got Ashwati Somaya, I think, legal provisions. What does Indian law say about death penalty? Okay, another person has asked the same question connected to this case law, how courts have evolved the death penalty jurisprudence, right? So, how has the death penalty jurisprudence evolved in India through judicial pronouncements, right? Similarly, we can add another question here. 5 most important Supreme Court decisions regarding death penalty, right? This question, will also help to develop this article further. Now, some people have asked very basic questions, right? Can state kill an individual? Is it justifiable for the state to actually kill an individual? Well, I think that is also a more fundamental question. So you can add that here. That what are the moral, legal, or jurisprudential arguments in favor and against death penalty, right? There's substantial jurisprudence against death penalty across the world, right? Across the world, there is substantial. So this becomes also an important question that, what are the arguments in favor or against? So one very interesting thing I want to share with you, like this is a learning from French finishing schools. So when you're writing an article, you can actually follow this method if you like. So what the French finishing schools, by the way, this is like the finishing schools are very celebrated. People across Europe used to go to France to attend these finishing schools. and this was considered an amazing education opportunity. Okay, so what did they actually teach? They said that uh, there is a thesis and there is an antithesis. So you suggest something to a thesis that I think that death penalty should be abolished in India. This is the thesis, and there is an antithesis to that, which is the opposite argument, right? So it will be like, why? So the same person should be capable of arguing the thesis as well as the antithesis. So the person who is arguing the thesis should also be able to say that, but this is why death penalty should continue. And then after giving the thesis and the antithesis, then you give a synthesis. The synthesis is the final say that you have by combining the thesis and the antithesis. This is one of the most amazing way of writing an article. You can present your arguments from the both sides and then finally reach a position as a synthesis. After looking at the arguments on both sides, you take a decision. If you look at a judgment is always written in this way. Thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. So now, what are the moral, legal, and jurisprudential arguments in favor and against death penalty? By the way, this can be very substantial, like lot of content. This itself. So sometimes you'll have to create sub questions, right? Like you have like a heading here, so you can have further subheadings, right? So it can be like this: arguments in favor of death penalty and arguments against death penalty. And somebody has pointed out, right, that what are the alternatives to death penalty? So there are many alternatives. So you can add them, alternatives to death penalty. This is also something which is very useful. So let's see, like, what are the other other questions that people have suggested. Somebody has suggested that is life imprisonment sufficient? Why do we have to have death penalty, right? Why not just life imprisonment? Okay, now this is a very good question, because some people will say that life imprisonment is not sufficient deterrent. People only are going to respond if you you hang them or whatever. You have to give death penalty. So the question is that, so the next big question that becomes very important is that, is death penalty a real deterrent? Now, I want to point out something. You will notice that if we go on, we can keep adding a lot of questions, and there is no end to this process. Okay, we can keep adding new questions throughout, and unendingly we can keep adding new questions. If anybody has any doubt, you can try this. I can assure you that we can create a lot of completely new questions, and you can end up writing a book. There are people who have written entire books on death penalty. Similarly, on any subject, I say that you can keep writing, and you can write a whole book. But you are not here to write a book. Most of you are going to just write an article, right? So it is 2,000 words or 1,500 words, whatever it is, the target. So you cannot write too much. I think what we have written down here is sufficient to write a 2,000 word article. We cannot possibly write more than that. Okay. So, and there are a lot of you, many of you have asked great questions, right? So somebody has asked, Piyush has asked, does death penalty violate right to life? Udit Bharadwaj is asking, has the enforcement of death penalty helped in reducing rate of a specific crime? This is what exactly, like, is death penalty a real deterrent? Like, that is what he's asking in a different language. Okay, that has it really helped? Then some people have stated certain cases, Jagmohan Singh versus state of Uttar Pradesh, that these should be discussed. What will be the consequence of abolishing death penalty? Like, what are the potential consequences? We can add, that's a very important question. What will be the consequence? So if you're going to really consider abolishing, you should think that what will be the consequence of abolition of death penalty. So a sub question here could be that experience of other countries which abolished death penalty, right? So death penalty was there almost all over the world at a point of time. At the time of Second World War, every country almost had a death penalty, but now so many don't have. So experience of other countries which abolished death penalty will help you to understand what can happen in India, right? Then you can have some argument also that, those countries are different, our country is different, but that is all fine. I mean, you are free to have whatever arguments you want. Okay, so alternatives to death penalty, objectives of punishment. So somebody deep is talking about objectives of punishment. Okay, reformist, deterrent, retribution. So in some, like for example, in Islamic jurisprudence, in Sharia law, they do not believe that this is a deterrent or anything. They believe in retribution, right? So there, if you have killed somebody, then their family can forgive you. So if the family doesn't want retribution, then no need to hang or kill the person anymore, right? There's no death penalty if the family of the person insists. So that is another view of death penalty, that it's a retribution. You have killed somebody, so there must be a retribution. People have a right to retribution. So these are all valid questions, and we can explore all these in your article. So which is why if you write an article, you will probably answer different questions, and I'll probably answer different questions, which is absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as that you're talking about important issues, you're talking about good things, and really relevant things. It is absolutely fine, right? Okay. So this is like example of how you will be structuring this. So I'm done with this particular. I think we are done with structuring this. So now what we are talking about is this, that it's a simple thing. Like, we just, once we have written these questions, it is a question of uh, filling up these details. Like it's like we have a structure, right? It's like when you build a house, there's a concrete structure which is first created, then you fill it in with bricks, and house is built, right? So that structure, the skeleton structure, is created like this. And we have a skeleton structure now for this article. If we just answer these few questions, then we will end up with a very nice article. Okay, it will be there are how many questions? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 large question, and there are further sub questions. If you answer these 8 questions and you write 300 words per question, you'll end up with an article which is 2000, more than 2000 words. And this is how you very simply write an article. And most important part is creating this skeleton. I don't need to teach you how to find answers to these questions and write the answers. Okay, the most important part is creating this skeleton structure. Once you have done it, you will be able to write this article in 2 hours, 3 hours, not more than that. Okay, it will not take you more than 2-3 hours once you have ended up with this structure. And remember that there will always be more questions. We can go on adding a lot of questions to this structure, but that is not the goal. Once you think that, okay, these are the 5, 6 or 10 important questions I'm going to answer in my article, that is it, that is enough. Make sure that you answer the most important questions that you think are most important, right? So you should prioritize some questions over others, but beyond that, I don't have any other thoughts on this. Okay. All right, so let's go to the next topic. So I'll be happy to show one more topic. How you can you can structure. So any other suggestions in the chat? People, please suggest. Give me your topic that you're working on currently, and I'll tell you how to work on it. I will show you how to structure it. Let's work on 2-3 such structures, and you'll start understanding how this works. Criminal trial against mentally unstable and insane person. Very good, very good. So Himanshu is asking a question that, this was a known topic. What if I don't know the topic? How am I going to frame questions then? So one possible way is that you do some research and then you frame a question. That is one possible solution. But for advanced writers, what I suggest is that don't research. Don't even start research before you frame your questions. Okay? How is that? I'll show you. You give me topics I know nothing about, and I am going to frame questions nonetheless. And after research, my structure may change a little, but it will not drastically change. The reason I ask you to frame the questions before you do research is because once you research, you get influenced by what you see. Okay, so I'll give you an example. So I asked one of my colleagues to write about, is real estate law a lucrative practice for lawyers right now? Right? Is real estate law a lucrative practice? Now this is pretty, it's not a legal subject; it's a practice management thing. But she had to write and she had to structure that article. So how is she going to do that? So now what happened is that she went and looked, and she researched, and she instantly found a lot of different answers by different people who have written that, different things. Like, I'll give you an example. Let's do this search right now. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to do a Google search on this, right? Is real estate, and I'll show you what happens when you research before you frame the question. Is real estate law practice lucrative? Okay, and I'm showing you something. If you can do for this, like, literally I did this exercise with my colleague to teach her how to do it. I was working on, like, like, where do you find good burgers in Bombay, and we structured that article. Literally, we structured an article called where can you find burgers in Bombay, the best burgers in Bombay. Once you do that, you know how to structure any article. And legal article, or any article, if you write, you will be able to structure it. Structuring is a thought process. It's a process of thinking. It is not anything else. Okay, so I search, is real estate law practice lucrative? Now lawcrossing.com has an article, pros and cons of practicing as real estate attorney. So I open this, okay, and they have some headings, whatever, they are saying it's a hot area of law, and it is an American article, right? So this has some information, and if you read this, you will see what they have written on, and then you will be writing on the same thing. Okay, you will be like, okay, what this basically has written on what there's a guy called O'Brien, and this article is talking about what work he does on a day-to-day basis, what his time goes into in his practice. It actually doesn't even talk about how much he earns, by the way, right? So, but it talks about, like, there's a real estate law association in 2002, which has 80 members now. Okay. So, like, many people are practicing real estate law. So they are showing that. But actually, if you look at this, it doesn't talk about how much money lawyers make. And what happened is that my colleague, when she wrote about is real estate law actually lucrative, what happened is that she failed to completely mention about how much money people earn. So if you're talking about lucrative, so I will show you how, if you read this, you will not come, or if you read any of the other articles, you'll never find this. But how I will structure it, and I'll find that if you have the questions, you will find the answers, by the way. So how I will say it is that, okay, what are the different areas of practice for real estate lawyers? One is in-house legal counsel in real estate companies. One is that you are arguing real estate matters in the court. Another may be that you have retainership with large builders. So there are different areas of practice. Some people are only working on due diligence for property, right? There are people who are entirely focused on due diligence of property. They don't do anything else, and they make enough money by doing that. So there are different sorts of people doing different things. So first I have to see what are the different kind of practices that real estate lawyers are doing in India. For example, one thing that we found out that we should mention is that a real estate lawyer can, draft a contract and charge anywhere between 5,000 to 30,000. Usual prices of a contract for individual lawyers, not for law firms. Then there are real estate law firms. You can work at a real estate law firm. How much do they charge for different kind of work? How much do they pay to their associates? How much they pay to their partners? These are basic questions. If you answer these questions, you will end up with a brilliant article on whether real estate law is lucrative or not. Look at this article. Is this really the answer to whether real estate practice is lucrative or not? It doesn't answer. And you can look at all the other articles on Google. It will not give you an answer. But when you read this, you start writing articles like this. Like, which practice areas are going to be the most lucrative in the future. ABA Journal in 2015. ABA is the American Bar Association. So they have written about that, real estate is going to be one of the most, lucrative things. But, you can use this as information in your article to support your argument that whether it is, lucrative or not. But this cannot be the basis of your article, right? So Google search doesn't always help you. You need to frame your questions first and then start writing. Okay, so this is an example I gave. So let us work on another topic. So somebody had in the chat has asked one of the questions. For example, consequences of inadequate due diligence. Okay, so more than one person has suggested this, so I'm going to use this. Okay, so I'm going to create another new document to work on this. Right? I have done no research on this before, nothing. I know about due diligence. I have done due diligence as a lawyer, but I will show you any which way. Maybe you guys can suggest the questions again, right? Like what questions can be asked. So this is the topic. Now, what are the questions? What are the primary questions? 5 most important questions you are going to answer in this article. People start suggesting one at a time, right? Okay, somebody said to further qualify due diligence. This is actually a very good point. That is it a due diligence in property matter, or are we talking about a due diligence in an M&A transaction? What is it, right? The consequence of inadequate due diligence in M&A transaction. So now we are very specific. Now let's see what questions can be asked. Okay, so what questions will you add to this? Please tell me. I'm waiting for your responses. What does due diligence include? Stages in an M&A deal where due diligence is required. Very good. Risk analysis. Brief about M&A role of due diligence. So I want to warn you about one thing, okay? So a lot of people make this very bad mistake. So once I asked a student, not a student actually, an intern to write an article, and I asked him to write an article on what will be the regulation of hydroelectricity plants in India. Like what regulations apply to a hydroelectricity plant in India. Okay, and you know what he started writing? So his article, okay, he has written 2,000 words. First 500 words, he has written what is electricity, what is hydroelectricity, what is different kinds of electricity, and like what are the important hydroelectricity plants in India, what is their capacity, how is the hydroelectricity industry doing in India, and 1,500 words went into this out of the 2,000 words, and last 500 words he has written about some regulations. Now if you see such an article, what will you say? You will say this is rubbish. I will say this is rubbish. Nobody will publish it, and in college you will get marks for this. This is the sad thing, that in college people do have such low standards that you write this kind of a thing, you get away with it. But do you think your client is going to pay you for such a thing? They are never going to pay you, right? So what can we do in that case? So first of all, never make the big mistake of giving a huge introduction, like going back, like we are talking about consequences of inadequate due diligence. So in M&A transactions, there are some against you who will start writing what is M&A, what is transaction, what is due diligence. No, we are not going to do that. Okay, that is like lowering the standards. Never do that. Never ever do that. Okay, the people who are going to read this article, consequences of inadequate due diligence in M&A transactions, trust me, they know what is M&A, what is due diligence. We are not going to waste our time answering such inane, boring questions. We are going to jump into good content right away. Okay. Okay. So let's start seeing what could those questions be. So we have actually a lot of suggestions from people. Okay, what does due diligence include? Stages in M&A deal when due diligence is required. Okay, why? So basic, always start from why. Why do we need due diligence in an M&A transaction? Right? Basic question that should be answered. Okay, we are not talking about what is due diligence, what is M&A. We're talking about why do we need due diligence in an M&A transaction, right? So second question, I would say, okay, this is, I don't need to know much about due diligence to come up with these questions. Okay, where do people usually go wrong in doing due diligence? Okay, maybe examples of big due diligence disasters in M&A transactions and how they affected those transactions. By the way, I don't even know if this has ever happened, if there are any, but if you look for it, you will probably find, And if you don't find anything, you delete the question, no problem. But you start with these questions worth exploring, right? Given the topic, this question is worth actually exploring whether there has been such situations. Okay. What else? What else? What else, guys? What does due diligence? Okay. What are the steps in? Okay. The process. What is the process of due diligence? What are the objectives? How long does it take? Right? These are basic questions about due diligence that we can also answer. Okay. Maybe if we have too many questions, we might delete these things. Okay. But at least what is the process of due diligence and what are the objectives is important. You can delete how long does it take if it sounds too general. So I may delete this. Okay. Then let's see what other people are saying. Risk analysis, right? What are the risks that due diligence protects us against? Okay. Somebody said essential elements of due diligence. So if I write what is the process of due diligence, what are the objectives, it is more or less covers what is the essential elements of due diligence, right? The process will cover the elements. Okay. So basic question, how can we know if a due diligence has been done properly and adequately, right? Other relevant question can you think of that we need to answer here? Any other? Please share in chats. Anybody? I can think of a couple of more very important questions, but I want them to come. Please. I've got a couple of responses. Okay, remedy. Very good question. Dino, well done. Remedy of no proper due diligence. So, what is a remedy if there is no proper due diligence? What can be done if you discover that due diligence was inadequate? Okay, what is the solution? Okay, then Chandana is asking, is there any legal remedies if due diligence is not done diligently? Okay, so can the law firm or service provider, so there are different kinds of due diligences by the way. There's legal due diligence, there's tax due diligence, there's technological due diligence, so there can be different kind of due diligences. So can the law firm or service provider be held responsible for conducting faulty due diligence, right? So very good question, very important question. Okay, now Uzair Ahmed, remedies for disaster calls, the same thing. Shashwati Soma, how important is business awareness? How important is business and awareness important? I don't understand this question really. So sorry, I'm not able to understand this question. Contract clauses to protect against bad due diligence. Okay, so can you now people are thinking very good. I like this. Deep is saying, can we enter into contract clauses in such a way that they protect against bad due diligence, right? So, what kind of terms to enter into with service provider to protect against bad due diligence? Do you see when we start thinking how all these things come up? Okay. Another question I'll tell you, like now that you have said contracts, I can think of a very relevant question that is it important to make sure that the service provider has substantial insurance? Okay, like malpractice practice insurance. Like this is basically, if you as a law firm, if you fail to deliver the results, you need to have insurances sometimes. Like you are insured for professional insurance. It is called, okay, malpractice insurance, malpractice / professional insurance. So if you have professional negligence and the other party suffers, so this insurance covers you. And in the UK, for example, you cannot practice in London. You cannot open a law firm in London unless you have this insurance. In India, also now, I was just reading an article by in Bar and Bench where Rajiv Khaitan was talking about how the Bangalore thing has come up, like Bangalore farm, the Bangalore office of Khaitan has come up, and he mentioned that a lot of customers now will come to them, a lot of clients will come to them and say that, how much insurance do you have? So now people are asking, as a law firm, you're going to do my due diligence, how much insurance do you have? And these are the real questions that are there out there in the market. People are thinking and working on. Okay, so that's great. Good that we have come up with such amazing questions. Okay. Important agreements under due diligence. No, there's no important agreements under due diligence. You will be looking at agreements. You will be looking at many other documents. Depending on what is the scope of the due diligence, you will be looking at many different things. So we can ask, we can put another question maybe, which could be something like this. Yeah. When is it okay to have a limited scope due diligence? Right? So in one circumstance, a lot of circumstances, due diligence is done in a limited way. A full due diligence is not done. So, for example, there was a transaction I worked on. So the Swarovski, the brand, the diamond jewelry brand Swarovski, right? So they were getting listed in India, and they were already listed. Their IPO was already done, and but they wanted to list another additional 5% of their shares. They wanted to put it on the stock exchange and through apply private placement. So they came to us, and we had to do a due diligence, right? We had to do a due diligence on Swarovski, and we did that. But there was a limited scope due diligence because just 3 months back or 6 months back, a full scale due diligence happened. A full scale due diligence happened on this particular company, and it did not make sense to go back and do all the due diligence. So only the last 3 months, whatever corporate actions were there, whatever agreements were there, only those things we looked at. Then also I remember that, whenever law firms are doing a tax due diligence, they do not look beyond 7 years. Sometimes in corporate they restrict it to only 3 years. Okay, they do not look beyond 3 years. So that is a limited scope due diligence. So that can also happen. So, but you can see how this got structured, right? In a few minutes, we all came up with these questions, and this is, I think, a brilliant article. If you answer all these questions, a really amazing article can be created out of that. Okay, so that is what it is. Okay, how to select a good service provider for due diligence? Deep has asked another question. So these are many good questions, right? Deep has suggested another good question, which is how to select the right service provider or law firm, right? Firm for due diligence. This is also a good question. And by the way, there is no way you are going to write all these questions. We can keep adding questions. We can write a whole book on due diligence, but that's not the objective. We are trying to write a limited number of things here. And if you answer, not even all these questions have to be answered. If you answer like 5, 6, 7 of these questions, you will end up with a very nice article on that. Okay. For the sake of it, we are going to take a completely random topic, a topic that you cannot even think of that you're going to work on, but we're going to take it. Okay. So let's say the topic is, how to set up a law firm in Uzbekistan. Okay. Like something really crazy. We are intentionally taking this kind of an insane topic just to show you how to structure even an article that you don't even know anything. Even I don't know anything about setting up law firms in Uzbekistan. I have never done it. I have never been to Uzbekistan. I have no idea if there is even any law firms in Uzbekistan. Okay, but we are going to structure an article on how to set up law firm in Uzbekistan. Okay, And by the way, if needed, I will supply the question. But I am asking you, can you ask the question, like what should be the important question? If you're writing this article, how to set up a law firm in Uzbekistan, which is absolutely crazy. You'll never actually have to write this. But I'm just showing you how to structure an article. So if you're writing an article on how to set up an law firm in Uzbekistan, what questions will you be asking? On the chat, I'm waiting for your responses. Definition of a law firm, Dino, certainly not. I told you, like when somebody asks you to write an article on hydroelectricity regulation, you do not start by what is hydroelectricity. You do not start by what is electricity. There are three kinds of electricity. That is ridiculous. So if you're not going to start with definition of a law firm or role of a law firm. Okay, but who can set up a law firm in Uzbekistan? Very good question. Like, can an Indian go and set up a law firm there? Or do you have to be an Uzbek citizen to set up? So, who can practice law in Uzbekistan? Right. So, what are the laws that govern law firms in Uzbek? Law firms and practice of law. Right. Then you guys are giving me amazing questions, really amazing, like fantastic questions are coming through. So I'll tell you what are the major practice areas. So Vishal Kumar and many others have asked the same question. What are the major practice areas for law firms in Uzbekistan? Great question. Okay. Restrictions for setting up law firms by foreign lawyers. So one more person is asking, is there any restriction? So this is great. Shashwati has asked restrictions on foreign lawyers in practicing in Uzbekistan, right? Okay, then what are the regulation on CA practice law in Uzbekistan? Great. So Siddharth, I hope you are a CA because can CAs practice law in Uzbekistan? Can accountants practice law in Uzbekistan? Great. Okay, no problem. We can add such questions and what is the business form? Very good question. What would be the business form or structure, right? Right. So business structure or form means that will it be a partnership? Will it be an LLP? Are there LLPs in Uzbekistan? We don't know. Can it be a private limited company? So all these questions, right? Then what act will this form be incorporated into? Like whatever, what laws. So the same thing. Business form will talk about that. Also, you have asked these questions already. That what are the laws that govern the law firms and practice of law in Uzbekistan? So that takes care of that question. Who can practice law in Uzbekistan? Shashwati Soma. So we have already added this question. Good question. Does one have to graduate from Uzbekistan, right? So it can be like, do you need any local qualification? Do foreigners? So sub question under that foreigner thing, restriction on foreign lawyers. So there will ask, there will add like something. Do foreign lawyers need any local qualification? Right? That will cover whether there are any exams. Uh, what about arbitration? What qualifications is it? Can foreign lawyers participate in arbitrations in Uzbekistan? Right? So if we keep adding questions like this, we'll end up with like a book on practicing law in Uzbekistan. But pretty much you can see that we are making good progress. None of us know anything about practice of law in Uzbekistan, but we are able to frame the questions nonetheless. Okay. What are the important sectors of practice, Siddharth? We have added this already. What kind of services the law firm will provide? Uzair has said, we have already added. Same question, right? Does it have a differentiation of solicitor and a lawyer like in the UK? Good question, right? So we can add this also. Does it have a differentiation? So, I mean, ठीक है, we can add this also. I mean, no problem. What are the different types of lawyers? Is there a distinction between solicitor and counsel, right? Are foreign law firms allowed to practice deep? We have already asked this. Limitation for law firm in Uzbekistan. I mean, limitations, what deep? I'm not, Dino is asking this. I'm not sure. What does he mean by limitations for a law firm? Can Big Four practice law in Uzbekistan? Great. I mean, this is a big question, right? Big Four go everywhere in the world and start practicing law, or they set up their own law firms. So, good question. In Uzbekistan, can they also do that, right? Big Four have a presence in Uzbekistan. Very interesting questions, right? By the way, if you did not do this exercise, if you Googled this topic, how to set up a law firm in Uzbekistan, you'll never come up with such innovative questions. Never ever. I can guarantee you that you will not come up with such innovative questions, and your article will never be as good. You will be regurgitating what is written everywhere else, and never end up with such an amazing article. What are the necessary documents and agreements required? Okay. So what is the paperwork? What are the major existing competition of the law firm? Good question. So, what are the major law firms already existing in Uzbekistan? Right. This will be a damn interesting article now, right? So, what are the cultural barriers to entry? Sure. Uh, what is the law firm culture like in Uzbekistan? Right? Pooja Patro has asked this question, but we can add this here. We have added na foreign law firm. We can add here. Uh, how is there any cultural or is the culture or language a barrier to entry? Right? Should you set up a law firm? So Deep is asking, should you even set up? Like, is there any sufficient economic or economic justification, basically, right? So the question is that is there enough opportunity for foreign law firms in Uzbekistan? So this will be a subtopic here, right? And we can ask this, like, what is the outlook for the Uzbek legal industry, right? So this covers both angles. Like one is that foreign lawyers, should they go in or not? Okay, and then the question is that local people. I mean, how are they placed? The local legal industry, how is it? Is there enough opportunity for them? Dino is explaining the area where law firm cannot practice due to state policy. Okay, so if there is any, you can keep adding such more and more obscure questions. I mean, this is a valid question, but I don't know if there is such limitation, then it is valid. If it is not there, not valid. Great guys, great work. I think we are doing well. Okay. Advertisement for setting up a law firm. So yeah, whether advertising is allowed, whatever, we can keep adding more and more questions. But we are not taking any more questions. I think we are done with this. How to set up a law firm in Uzbekistan. If someone now answers these questions, does some research, answers these questions, we'll be pretty much done with this, and we'll have a great article on how to set up a law firm in Uzbekistan. So anybody think that, anybody any questions on structuring? We are done with talking about Uzbekistan and law forms. This was just to demonstrate that it is possible to write an article on a topic you'd have no clue about, provided you are ready to do the structuring. And you first do the structuring without doing any research. From your common sense, you come up with the most sensible questions. Then you go and research. By the way, if I research, maybe I'll find out that foreign lawyers are not allowed. Then many of the questions I'll have to delete out of this. Okay. So after research, your skeleton can change a bit, but basically this is what it is. Okay. Sashwati is asking, is it necessary to conclude every article? You don't have to give a conclusion. I mean, it's not necessary. It can be like, what is the conclusion of this article? How to set up a law firm in Uzbekistan? You can write 2 lines that the Uzbekistan is still too small a legal market for foreign lawyers to take interest. Or you can write that it's a booming industry. It is a time to go and set up. Like whatever your conclusion you can write, but I'm not big on conclusions. Okay, rather than conclusions, I prefer some sort of a call to action at the end. Call to actions are like this: that would you like to know more about law firms in Uzbekistan? You can write an email to me. This is my email ID. Or you can write, if you're trying to set up a law firm in Uzbekistan, I can help you. That kind of call to action at the end of the article is usually more useful for everybody. Or you can say that, if you like to more about this, you can refer to this link, and the link has a lot of information, whatever, like, or subscribe to my email list, whatever. Like, you can do anything, but give a call to action rather than finishing your article with. Ultimately, even if you're writing it in a course, the point is that why are you writing? I want you to publish. I want you to benefit from doing all this activity. Otherwise, what is the use of doing so much writing, so much work, right? You're going to publish and you should benefit from it. That's the whole idea. So put a call to action at the end of your article. Okay. Any other question I can answer? I'm going to wrap up otherwise. Okay, so I hope today's session was useful for most of you. If you have no further questions, let's wrap up. And thank you so many of you for joining. It was a great session. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I hope you liked it as well. And love to get your feedback. You can write to me. I'm going to type out my phone number here for everybody. You can contact me on WhatsApp, share your feedback privately, publicly, whatever works. And if you have any feedback, WhatsApp me, preferably not call me unless very necessary. Just, WhatsApp it to me and ask me any question. Happy to answer. And all the best, guys. Take care.